Hey everyone. Before we get into today's interview, just wanted to drop a little reminder to stay up to date with all the latest episodes of On the Margin. You can subscribe to the Blockworks Macro YouTube. Just go up there, just click the little subscribe button, or you can click the links at the top of this episode. It'll take you over to Apple, Spotify, whatever your preferred platform is. Just subscribe there. If you could, leave a rating and review. Really appreciate it. All right, on with the show. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of On the Margin. Today, I'm joined, as always, by the magnificent Mr. Mark Briscoe. Same magnificence I missed last week, Mark.
Too kind. And I'll do the quick reveal. I wanted to wear my green.
Oh, Mark, wait. Oh, sorry. Before we get to your reveal, I missed last week. I figured I owe you, and I have a reveal for you.
Oh my gosh.
Actually,
come on
for 1 second. Yeah.
Come on. It's like those videos where you just pop in.
Anyone under 80.
Oh,
what do you think about that? I figured you would like this shirt.
I love that shirt. I love that shirt. I might even go anyone under 60, but anyone under 80 would be a great.
That feels like a non-controversial. For those who are following along only on audio, I'm wearing a shirt that's a presidential slogan, but it says anyone under 80 2024. So
that's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I was going to wear my green shirt. But my wife said I'm not allowed to wear the green shirt and the orange pants. So I got the orange pants. I put the green on with the socks with the Bitcoin bull because we are in desperate need of the resumption of the bull market. And that would have been, I think, green shirt and orange pants would have been perfect because you were there last week and I should be there right now drinking Guinness with all my friends. All my friends are in Ireland for the Notre Dame Navy game tomorrow. I have my Fighting Irish belt on as well. But I can't believe it's football season. I mean, it doesn't feel like football season when it's going to be 98 degrees here in Chapel Hill today. So it's hot.
Oh my God.
I was in Chicago yesterday. I forgot. Yeah, I lived in Chicago for 9 years. I forget how humid it is in Chicago.
This is my problem in New York, Mark. I mean, I have to walk most places. You walk, subway, and in the summer here, it's 95 degrees, 100% humidity. We got a bunch of stories this week, and maybe we just get right into it. So we can start with some of the macro. And what I wanted to get your take on was we had PMI come through this week and is looking, the TLDR is that it's looking soft.
So in honor of my favorite movie, Top Gun Maverick, it's heading for the hard deck. It's heading for the hard deck.
So we're looking at services on the left and global manufacturing on the right. And just to be clear for listeners who aren't following along, the survey was 52.2 for services. What we actually got was 51. Survey for global manufacturing was 49. We got 47. These aren't horrendous numbers, but they're not trending in the right direction.
Well, the manufacturing is horrendous, right? Sub 50 is a recession, right? And in 47, you can see on this chart, it doesn't go below, 50 very often.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go below 49 very often, except in the, global financial crisis, it crashed. And if you went back to 2001, 2002, you'd see similar numbers, but the manufacturing numbers are horrible. And it's funny, I was in Chicago giving a speech, basically about Chairman Powell, and the title of the speech was, no landing zone. Did the Fed pull off the miracle, soft landing or no landing? And it's interesting if you just look at data, and this is one of the charts I showed. You say, well, that looks like a recession. I mean, we went way below 50 on the manufacturing. We went below 50 on services, and then we had this little ramp back up, and everybody's like, oh, look, the Chairman Powell, he did it. And one of the points of my talk was, well, no. Someone else did it. There was another pilot, a drone pilot. So back to anyone under 80, we got all these old guys running it, and it's not them. It's the 26-year-old drone pilot. And it was the fiscal. We had a fiscal explosion
Yeah.
12 months ago. It was, I mean, Michael, I didn't even realize how big it was. We went from a budget of $500 billion, which still a ridiculous number, of deficit, to 1.7 trillion. We pumped 1.2 trillion extra dollars into the economy when no
On
one
what
was
time
looking.
frame? On what time frame was that, Mark?
The past year.
Yeah. Jesus.
And it's why no one was looking, because everybody was focused on the, hey, he's raising rates, he's raising rates, he's raising rates. Well, and what was interesting is he did the kind of heading for the hard deck, where he was pulling liquidity out of the system. We've talked about this maybe 3 weeks ago. And then he did the 300 billion kind of super injection around SVB, but he has gone back to pulling liquidity out. So net, he's not the savior. It's the fiscal. And no one's paying attention to that.
So looking at what bond yields have done here, so the 10-year responded to PMI, sold off. I didn't include this chart, but actually stocks rose. Just think about how funny our system is. You've got collapsing manufacturing PMI, which causes yields to sell off, which causes the stock market to go up. Feels a little backwards, but that's the state of affairs. On the right side of this, what we're looking at is the market implied US terminal rate. So that, after the reversion post SVB banking crisis, has been steadily creeping up again to just under 5.5%. So the latest is 5.47. So, we're recording this a couple of hours before Jackson Hole, but Mark, would love to just get your updated thoughts on where rates are headed. Are we in this kind of higher for longer holding pattern? The market is pricing in basically, one more rate hike essentially by end of year, and then kind of moving into a holding pattern. What do you see happening here?
So I think we're back to normal, but because we were in abnormal for so long, meaning ZERP,
right,
that people don't know how to listen to the chairman anymore. They don't know what normal interest rates are. We're supposed to have positive interest rates, right? That's how capitalism actually works, right? There's the promise of earning when you put your capital to work. And so the difference between 5.25, 5.5, 5.75, it's irrelevant. What had to happen, and what did happen, was we had to get out of ZERP, which was designed to save the bank's balance sheets. And we have to go back to a world where they can actually earn some money. And remember, the Fed only exists for the banks. It is a private corporation, not federal, no reserves. It is a private corporation owned by the banks and the families that own the banks. And its job is to maximize bank profits. So that's what they're doing. And the fact that everybody thinks that they control everything else is why people are missing this fiscal mess. And so the thing I was totally, I won't say I was wrong. I just didn't see it, because it's not like I said the opposite. It's just I didn't say this, which was, if you looked at all the data coming into last year, and we did, right? PMIs were collapsing, services and manufacturing, yield curve was inverted. All these things were saying serious recession. And I said a couple weeks ago, I said, look, I was wrong. I mean, everywhere I go, restaurants are full, airports are full. I mean, O'Hare was a nightmare yesterday. I mean, it was crazy. People are spending. Well, how the hell are they still spending? Well, it's because the government handouts in the form of disability payments, unemployment payments, all these direct government stimulus programs. And turns out there's still $300-ish billion left in the coffers from the handouts from a couple of years ago. And credit card debt. I mean, credit card debt has gone absolutely, I think it hit $1 trillion for the first time. I think I have that stat right. So I just totally missed the fiscal part, that the government was going to spend their way into oblivion and not worry about the devaluation of the currency, which is why Larry Fink went on TV and said, maybe you should own some Bitcoin. You should buy it from me, but you should own some Bitcoin to protect yourself against currency devaluation. Come on. He said that on television.
I know. That was a pretty monumental moment. You know who actually I've got to give credit to, because she's been saying this for such a long time, is Lynn Alden. And you can go back years ago and find these articles that she was writing on the transfer from monetary to fiscal. Just last month, she came on the podcast and was explicitly talking about this before these latest numbers got revealed. And yeah, I got to give credit to her for seeing this. And she was using the 1930s and 40s as an analog. And very similar thing happened back then.
Which is, we have a 90-year cycle. And it's been going on for millennia. And it's because it takes 3 generations for people to forget.
Yes.
Right? And they repeat the same mistakes, but it takes 3 generations. It's why that saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations actually exists in 42 languages. It translates that same phrase in 42 different languages. So it's the same phenomenon. My favorite, father is in India. Father rode a grandfather rode an elephant. Father rides a horse. Son rides a burro. And, that's the reality. So every 90 years, you get this super cycle. Now, what's interesting about it is 1840, depression, like the Great Depression, which became the second Great Depression after the Great Depression of the 30s. So the 20s, in theory, could or should, if you believe that. And we're not out of the woods yet. It's only 2023. So there's still time for people to mess up.
Yeah. So Neil Howe was on the program a couple of weeks ago. Neil, obviously the author of The Fourth Turning and one of the pioneers of generational theory, wrote a book that came out just a couple of months ago called The Fourth Turning is Here. And one of the observations that I've always liked about, so to your point about, shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, I mean, you can see that echoed across. There are other sayings, right? It's kind of the hard times make for good men, good men make for
bad times
make for right. So
hard men make for good times.
And that observation of cycles across around 100-year time period, because it's generational forgetting, that is echoed sociologically with Neil's work. It's echoed financially with the work of many financial historians, but Ray Dalio and his sort of long-term, short-term debt cycle. And when you see these patterns, kind of people come to the same conclusions across multiple disciplines, is very interesting. And in Neil's book, he actually wrote a whole chapter on connecting, the same observation that he'd made from the sociological perspective from other different disciplines.
I think again, and it's your incredible, liberal arts training, that cross-disciplinary observation is so important. And anyone kind of listening to us, and we do appreciate that. If you take away nothing else from today, which is maybe likely, but that is something you should take away, which is when you see people reach similar conclusions using different disciplines and tactics and processes, that's when you should pay attention, right? And that doesn't happen very often, right? Because people are going their different ways. But when cross-disciplinary things happen, and this is true of innovation, right? Great innovation happens at the confluence of multiple disciplines coming together. Think about bioinformatics and things like that, and gene discovery. Drug discovery, big data and science and healthcare. Same thing here is when a sociologist can reach the same conclusion as an economist, can reach the same conclusion as an investment person, as an entrepreneur, all kind of saying, something just doesn't feel right here. That's when you should really, really pay attention.
I agree with that. I agree. Mark, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in crypto the last week. So it has not been a good
Let's
week.
not. Let's just talk macro today.
We can. So I just want to show. So this chart. I mean, I'll give here while I'm pulling this up. I'll give you my perspective here. So it looks like SpaceX actually sold off some of their crypto or the Bitcoin that they held, marked it down to a loss. One of the observations that came out of another Blockworks podcast, 1000X, that I thought was useful is what we're looking at here is the chart of Bitcoin, but also MicroStrategy and Coinbase. And if you look at these charts, one over the other, this is from on a 1 month time frame. MicroStrategy and Coinbase actually led the decline. And you could look at MicroStrategy and Coinbase as a proxy for institutional demand in crypto, which I think is the correct. I think that's the kind of the correct way of looking at it. Overall, though, I know whenever the market moves like this, people want to talk about it and they want an answer for it. I mean, this is going to be a range bound time in my opinion, and there are going to be.
There's two other things. So a couple weeks ago, I wore my roller coaster socks.
Yeah.
That I break out every summer because summer is time for roller coasters. And the thing about roller coasters is there's a lot of ups and downs, but you end up in the exact same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that, right? We have an up,
I agree.
And then we have a down, and then we have an up, and then we have a down. But we end up in the same spot over, and summer doldrums are that. Now, what's interesting about this chart, and I love your point about leading. Someone asked me, why are stocks going down? Right? Stocks are down 5% over the last month. It's a big move. And it seems like they go down most days. Well, it's because there aren't any humans involved. The humans are on vacation, right? I said, we joke at the Europeans, they take August off. Haha, we work so hard. Try to get a meeting with somebody this month. Forget it. I mean, I was in Chicago yesterday. I tried to get meetings. 4 people. I'm gone. I'm out. And I don't begrudge them being out. Go on vacation. It's great. But it is fine. So the machines take over, and the machines are pushing everything down. They're pushing everything down. Now, I will agree with you that there was this exacerbation on the SpaceX, news, and there was a sharp drop in BTC. But that's the nature of the beast. The thing that people forget about Bitcoin is it's not really liquid. It's not really deep because so much of the market cap is hodlers or hodlers, however you want to pronounce it. And they're just not selling at any price. But the same coins churn over and over and over. And that's true of most things, right? Microsoft, there's a whole bunch of people that never sell their Microsoft, and there's stuff that churns. The index funds don't sell their Microsoft. And so when the free float is very small, you can get this is a chart. This orange and light blue lines, those are machines. Okay. The dark blue line is humans. That's a human reaction. That's fear. That's a human reaction to a new piece of information. The orange and the blue, like I said, the institutional demand, that had nothing to do with institutional demand. It has to do with machines, with Ken Griffin saying, everyone's on vacation. It's not Ken, it's Ken's massive team. And it's not even really a team, it's robots. So it's the robots saying, okay, we pushed stocks up the first half of the year when no one thought they were going to go up. And we made a ton of money because people were chasing. Now we're going to push down and we're going to seed the clouds and they're going to go down for a while. Except for NVIDIA in theory, right? Which, said, well, we're going to have all this revenue this quarter. And stock popped after hours. But then where did it end up at the end of the day yesterday? It's interesting. Flat. It was up 8% at one point, ended up flat. Stock market crashed yesterday. If you would have said NVIDIA, actually people did say this 2 days ago, if NVIDIA beats, already raised expectations, the market's going to go crazy. Well, it did, but not up. crazy. It went down crazy. And we'll see how it levels out today. But that's the machines. The machines, again, and if you look at volumes in the summer, they're really low. So none of this is really that much information. Ultimately, Bitcoin, when the ETF's approved, that's when the bull gets his cape back.
So NVIDIA, you and I have been talking about quite a bit. Their earnings came out this week, as you mentioned. So the estimate for Q2 revenue was 11.04 billion. The big beat, 13.51 billion. That's big beat. The adjusted earnings per share came in at $2.70 versus an estimate of $2.07. And they, said that they see third quarter revenue at 16 billion, plus or minus 2%, against what Wall Street estimates, analysts were estimating, which is 12.5 billion. So big beat on both revenue and profitability. And then they raised estimates against what was already a pretty aggressive estimate. And then they approved an additional $25 billion share buyback. So it's basically everything that analysts want to see. And to your point, Mark, it's interesting that there was the initial run up and then it didn't really trade higher. And I think
because I'll tell you why.
Why?
People found out how they did it. This is not new. This is what commodity tech companies have been doing forever. They help finance their customers' purchases to stuff the channel. One of their customers got reported midday yesterday. They took out a loan equal to their market cap in order to buy NVIDIA chips. Shockingly financed in part by NVIDIA. That is stuff in the channel. Cisco used to do this. And the run-up in Cisco looks so much like the run-up in NVIDIA. And again, most people weren't around doing this in 99, 2000. So they don't have any perspective. And they think this is some new thing and that no company has ever grown like this. Are you joking? This is a tale as old as time. You can go back to IBM in the 60s, and they did the same thing. They would stuff the channel with big old boxes that they would finance. There's a multi-billionaire up in Richmond, Virginia. He helped them, right? He would help companies finance purchases they didn't need using seller financing. And what happened to Cisco in 2002? They reversed all of those gains because they had to write off a whole bunch of inventory that turns out nobody needed because they had stuffed the channel. So I believe this is going to end the same. And, people are going to lose a lot of money. But someone asked me yesterday, but you're not short. I'm like, no, I'm not. I learned my lesson back in 2000, trying to short companies like MicroStrategy and Cisco. And look, Julian Robertson shut down the largest hedge fund in the world at the time. Just let that hang in the air for a second. It was a $20 billion hedge fund back when $20 billion was a lot of money. And he literally wrote a letter to clients saying, I don't understand. Companies that don't make money should not, and these guys do make a little bit of money, but this company sells at 44 times revenues. Not 44 times earnings, but 44 times revenues. It's worse than Sun Microsystems, which was the poster child of the 2000 mania, was selling at 10 times revenues. And Scott McNally said, in order for you to make a decent return at this price, I have to basically give you all of my revenue for the next 10 years, which would be really hard because I'd go to jail. Because I have to pay taxes and I have to pay my employees and I have to pay for my goods and services. So that's just not going to happen. And Sun Microsystems went down 98%. 98. And again, I'm not saying this is going to go down 98%, but it's going to go down a lot. I just can't tell you when. Remember, we've talked about this too. MicroStrategy, before it was a Bitcoin bank, was a tech consulting company. I know the word consulting gives you PTSD Michael. But they were a tech consulting company that kind of cooked the books a little bit. Oh, that's slander. No, he actually paid a big fine, admitted guilt to the SEC on this. The stock was the darling of the day traders. They used to use message boards instead of Twitter, and stock ran, buried the shorts, ran from basically nothing to 100, carried the shorts out. Shorts came back, ran to 200, carried the shorts out again. Shorts came back all the way to $330, maybe $331, and then crashed to 3. So the shorts were right, but it was only the last shorts that got there. So, we live in amazing times. We live in a gamified system where, things can stay high longer than you like, except where's AMC right now? All-time low. If they didn't do the 10-for-1 reverse split, it's $1.41. GameStop, almost back to where it was 3 years ago. So these things do end. And, it's just this one is supported by not day traders, but the tyranny of the index fund that Michael Green and others talk about, that, every 2 weeks, a bunch of money has to go in to the Fangman stocks because they are cap weighted parts of the indices. And at least for the next 7 years, no, how many years we got left? 6 years. For 6 more years until the last of us baby boomers. My wife's the last year of the baby boom. And she's 59. So until that group stops turning 60. No, it's longer than that. It's 11 till she's 59. It's 12 years. In 12 years, all of us will be taking money out of the system. None of us will be putting money into the system because 71 and a half, you have to, start taking it out. And there's an echo boom that's big, but there's a bust in between. Gen X, Gen Y are not big enough. Gen Z and Gen A are big, but they're young and they don't have any money. And we're going to see what happens when there's $1 trillion of outflow from these stocks instead of trillions of inflows. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I didn't realize that about the stuff in the channel. What I've always thought about NVIDIA is that nothing that goes up like this will not come down on the other side. And I think that what you and I said about, we talked about this back when Chegg had its overreaction in one direction, but I think what we're seeing is what you and I have talked about, which is a drastic overreaction to AI in the short term, and which will eventually lead to a capitulation and some sort of admittance that we got way out ahead of our skis, a couple of years of winter, or maybe I'm scarred by crypto, but something like that. And then you will gradually see the implementation of AI in companies that make sense. One thing, though, that I still struggle to get a handle on myself is, what the business model is for AI and who benefits. And what I keep coming back to
Michael, you can't ask logical, serious questions in a period of hyperbolic stock market, pumping. Come on. Business models, revenues, actual use cases. We just did a webinar on this, right? This is a 70-year overnight success story. The term AI was coined in 1955. Okay, in the 1980s, we had an AI boom that was going to change the world. Okay, Intel was going to change the world with their AI implications for chips. Stock went up tenfold from $12 to $120. And today I don't even know where it is, like 38, something like that. That's 20 years later.
So the benefactor that I see very clearly for AI is big corporations, frankly. It's the Microsofts and the Googles and those sorts of companies, because what it allows you to do, I think it's a little gross how much these corporate CEOs are openly salivating over the opportunity to trim 30% of headcount or whatever it is. But that's what's going to happen, right? I mean, a lot of knowledge worker email jobs are going to get replaced permanently by AI, I think. And that's just, I think that's what's going to happen. So it's ironic that I think the VCs are cheering for the Silicon Valley VCs, rather, cheering for this so loudly when I don't really see this being wildly helpful for them. I think it's ultimately going to be really helpful the incumbents that they're trying to challenge with new startups. But I could be totally wrong about that. I'm not some kind of AI analyst. And
look, it's like every computing wave. There will be real innovation. There'll be early adoption. There'll be a mania. There'll be a collapse. There'll be a trough of disillusionment. And that trough of disillusionment will leave companies like this, I don't know, down 50, 60, 70, 80%.
Yeah.
It's coming. Can't tell you when.
I agree.
It's coming.
So I want to get to two more big stories here, which is one, something that we've been talking about for a while, but Mark, I just cannot get my head around, and I'm wondering if you could enlighten me. And then the other one, which is housing, and the other thing that I want to talk to you about is the China slowdown, which I feel like is very real and has big implications. So let me go over to some of these slides. I'm going to skip through some of this, but so this is what we're looking at here is the monthly mortgage payment using the median existing home price and assuming a 20% down payment and a 30-year mortgage rate. So these are sort of hypothetical numbers, but ones that are probably directionally correct. And you can see this going all the way back to about 2000, right? So 2000 to where we are today, 2023. So this number bottomed in around 2012, right? Post housing crisis, when this monthly number was $577. In 2020, 2021, it was a much more affordable $977. Still almost a doubling, but the economy was also, humming along during that time, bull market, wages going up, stock prices going up, et cetera. We are now, with the recent run up in mortgages, up to $2,322, which is about 4 times what it was back in 2012. And I think the other thing that's important to point out here is the rate of change that this happened in. I mean, the move from 2012 to 2020, that was about 8 years, and it was a double. And it just moved very quickly. So what you would expect to see, I think, is I think you would expect to see, and this is all interest, by the way. The principal first payment is down from what it was, but the interest is soaring. So what you would expect to see is a slowdown, I think. And this is the 30-year mortgage fixed rate, according to bankrate.com. So again, going all the way back to 2000, where mortgage rates were at about 8%. They went all the way this downtrend into bottoming at 3%, under 3% in 2020. We're back to where we were in 2000 at around 8%. Now, last month in July, we actually had new one-family houses sold. I mean, look at we're up. The amount of new homes that are being sold is continuing this steady uptrend. But we do have mortgage applications, which are a more forward-looking indicator, finally dropping to the lowest in 95, but since 1995. But Mark, help me make sense of this, because I get that we're on 30-year fixed rate mortgages, people are locked into their homes, et cetera, but people still have to move, right? And the prices are set on the margin. So how have, it's been a full year at this point, how have home prices just not responded? And rents are the same thing. Rents continue to climb.
Well, rents are definitely climbing, I think, because of this problem. Housing prices are falling, and they're down in just about every market. I had this great series of charts yesterday. The what the hell's the name of the group that does the housing numbers? It just went right out of my head. But National Housing and some NHIB or whatever. So the housing index is down, and then they also do an affordability index, and this this was a little cheesy, but they did a thermometer, like green to red. The whole country was red. I mean, affordability has fallen off a cliff, and that's what this purchase applications drop is telling you, right? Is if you're in a home, great, you can afford it, because we had that 13-year period of stupid policy where we took interest rates to zero, even though we didn't need it, and we basically just stuffed people into homes. Okay, fine. But then you do the fastest rate increase in history, which, okay, Powell can claim a lot of firsts in history. This is the fastest rate increase in history. And we're right back to where we were 20 years ago. The difference is housing prices aren't the same as they were 20 years ago. So that's your point on the chart. Now, the only problem I have with your first chart is it's a terrible chart crime, right? 20-year charts have to be logarithmic scale. They can't be linear scale. So that rise looks much worse than it is, because it's just a double. 1,000 to 2,000 is a double, the same as 600 to 1,000. Well, I guess 600 to 50, only 50%. But the issue I have is, yes, this is a horrible trend, and it's bad for the average American in particular. And that was probably the biggest point of my talk yesterday. Was there was this great cartoon, and it showed a giant plane, like a double-decker jumbo 747, and the top was the elite, and the middle of the plane was the wealthy, and then hanging on to the landing gear was everybody else. And it said, your view of the landing depends on where you're sitting. And so the people sitting on the landing gear, they're going to get squashed. The people at the bottom of the plane, it's going to be a little bouncy. But the people at the top of the plane drinking champagne, they love this guy. He is their hero, because stocks have rebounded. Nvidia's up a lot. They love that because that's what they own. The average person doesn't own any stocks. This is the crazy part. 49% of people in this country don't own stocks. That's just a crazy stat. What they own is houses. And houses are falling. And why are rents sticky? Well, to your point, people who have to move, which is not as much as there used to be because of remote work, there aren't as many people being forced to move. But if you do have to move, right? Let's say you finish school and you got to move somewhere, or your company transfers you, or whatever it is, and you have to move. That's who's making these home purchases. So they're not zero. Apple's relocating their second headquarters here to Raleigh. So every house that goes on the market here is getting bought at crazy prices, because there's 4,000 people being forced to move here. So, I mean, I guess they'll hire some local people, but it's a whole bunch of people moving in. And so I guess the part that I'm really struggling with housing is, if your goal is to reverse, and now I'm going to go sinister Saturday, right? If the goal is to reverse this decades long trend of home ownership and get people to own nothing, right? You won't own a house, you'll rent. And there was an article yesterday. They call them guppies. There's something about, there's a term for it where young people have given up hope of ever owning a home. They're just like, I'm going to rent forever.
Anecdotally can completely confirm that people feel like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a weird dynamic, because, right after the war, home ownership, you were un-American if you didn't want to own a home.
I know.
Right? I mean, literally, you were un-American. And that has been everything from tax law, right? I can deduct my mortgage interest, but not my interest for student loans, not my interest for credit cards, not my interest for a loan I make cheap. Why? Home ownership. It's all about home ownership, right? And so we rigged the system to encourage home ownership. Well, why? Well, because again, if you have all these entitlements that you promise people, and at some point you may not be able to honor them. Well, what do you got to do? You got to have some way for people to have wealth. Well, let's pump up the value of their asset. And if their biggest asset is their house, and we can inflate that over time. So it's like the anti-currency devaluation. Houses and stocks actually look like they're doing well as long as you don't price them in anything that matters. Like one of my favorite charts is stocks look like they're at all-time highs, give or take, but that's priced in dollars. We price them in gold. They're the same price as 1997. They look like that chart you showed of mortgage applications. Yeah, because the money just keeps getting devalued, which in theory makes my house price on Zillow look better. But we've talked about this before. My house doesn't grow. It doesn't get more efficient. It actually wears out. Houses are a wasting asset. They're not a growth asset. The money gets worse.
I forgot one chart that I wanted to show you here. One thing that I wanted to show you here as well, doesn't even need to be a chart, but Zillow announced this week that they're launching home loans to help more people get a home with a new down payment option of, how much do you think, Mark?
0.
1%.
1%.
1% down payment on your home, which is...
Because, Michael, if 4-to-1 leverage is good, 80% mortgage, 99% leverage is really good.
Better, baby. Keep the party going.
And look, if housing prices are going to fall 1% a year, they can take everybody's equity every year and put that on their bottom line when they foreclose on the house. See, this is like crypto lending, right? When I told you the story where my brother called me and said, they stole my crypto. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, you're the idiot that levered up 100x. And then someone said to me, Mark, you don't understand. That's their business model. They lend people 100-to-1 with the intent of seizing the collateral. Like, oh my God, that is theft. So if you loan people 99% for 1% down, and then you get to foreclose on the asset, if you intended to foreclose, is that theft? I don't know. Seems like it.
Yeah, it depends if Zillow really wants to own that many houses. But I think my sense is that banks, when they foreclose on the homes, they don't want to be homeowners, right? They're not trying to do that. But maybe Zillow has other plans. I don't know.
The banks just sold them all to Blackstone.
Yeah.
And so you're right. They don't want to own them, but they just want the fees. But again, I'm not accusing Zillow of being like the crypto lenders who literally were stealing, but it's a weird 99% loans. Has that ever worked out? Name a time in history where putting 100 times leverage on an asset was a good idea. It's just never been a good idea. Look at phony and fraudy, as I like to call it. All those FHA loans at 3%. And look, if the market's going straight up, it's awesome, baby. It's awesome, right? If the price goes up 10% and you have a 99% loan, you make 10x on your equity. Not bad.
Not shabby.
And now you don't have very much, but it goes from not much to a little, and from a little to a medium. But all it takes is one little downturn and you are wiped. And I don't know. This is where I get really confused, honestly. We can talk about all these scenarios that are really bad, right? People watching their mortgage, myself, right? My mortgage went up double because I 10 years ago did a variable rate mortgage that I don't even remember doing, but I did it. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just saying I don't remember even doing that. And 10 years later, my mortgage goes from 3% to 8%. I mean, that's a horrible feeling. Now, touch wood, thankfully, I was able to I paid off half of it and got the rate back down, or the payment back down to, actually, they didn't change the payment. It's just I was paying more principal. But it's a crazy thing if you think about the average person who doesn't have $500 in savings if your mortgage payment goes up $1,000 a month. What do you do? Well, you can't move because you can't afford a new house. So you move and you rent. And that's why rentals are. And I look, I'm shocked at how many rental units are going up here in Chapel Hill. I mean, I'm like, who's going to live in all these? But they are slowly filling up. And I think it's the people who they've just given up on home ownership.
Yeah, search me.
And the next one is cars, right? This is crazy to me. There are 14 cities in the country that signed on to this thing to make personal ownership of cars illegal by 2030. Are you joking? And I mean, exactly. They're trying to convert in these, what do they call them, 15-minute cities, where it's all walking, public transportation. You're not allowed to own a car. A couple of them, this is crazy. A couple of them said you're not allowed to eat meat in these cities. Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? But
yeah, you know what? Actually, if you, I don't know how I feel about this, but Balaji has this idea of a network state, and what you're describing there sounds a little like that. It's these smaller communities with an express set of preferences. I think he actually led with the example of a health food one. So no, preservatives or seed oils or whatever it is in this city. Just a belief. We're going to build a city around this concept. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
all right, I'll look at that.
I could see that actually.
A good guy. I mean,
yeah,
smart guy.
yeah.
I'll read about that.
Mark, I want to make sure that we get to China. So I've got a slide here, and I've also got some statistics to run by you. But we talked about this with Michael Cow and Nick Glinsman earlier this week. So I'm not sure if you can. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this was a great dashboard from Bloomberg calling it China dashboard of disappointment. Yeah,
propaganda is so good in America.
Alliteration like that.
Good at propaganda.
I know. So we've got industrial production here, property investment, retail sales, and fixed asset investment. If you're following along on video, I will just tell you every single one of these charts is down and to the right. Slightly different curve on some of these, but it's all the same story, down and to the right.
Yeah.
And on top of that, some of the other statistics that I've got here for you are exports are down, or they fell 14.5% year on year in July. China is now officially in deflation, which is pretty interesting. Youth employment, youth unemployment is at a record high, around 20%, Mark. Youth unemployment around 20%. Just think about that. Credit growth has fallen.
Ours, but we don't count it the way they count people in college as unemployed. We don't, which is ridiculous. People in college are unemployed; they just are, but we don't count. So I get that. Look, I'm not defending China's problems; they're real, and these charts make it acutely make you acutely aware of the issue. The question someone asked me the other day is this a controlled demolition? I thought that was such a good question, because everything China does is controlled, right? It's planned. And I think the answer is yes. It's a controlled demolition. And it's Xi unwinding the left side of these charts, which is the straight up, corrupt period post WTO, where the previous administration basically enriched the party at the expense of everybody else, and this is a systematic dismantling of that. Now the question is that a good idea? Right? Do you really want to dismantle your property sector and your manufacturing sector? And but here's the thing: if you've been to Beijing lately, you can actually see the sky. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you go to Beijing, it was disgusting. I mean, it was truly disgusting. You could not see anything, literally. Couldn't see the sky, couldn't see buildings. I mean, it was like being in a cloud bank. Now you go, you actually see the sky. So pollution It's not completely gone, but it's pretty
Getting
good.
better.
It's getting better. You look at the you go to Shanghai and it's vibrant. I mean, it's buzzing again. And it's like, well, wait a second. How can that be if the property market's collapsed? Well, the ghost property market is gone, right? You can't just buy all these apartments from your friend and have them pump up the price and then sell them to another friend, and then sell them to an SOE. We actually have to have people living in these apartments and using them. So there's people walking the streets of Shanghai. 44 million people, by the way. That's the crazy thing. A city of 44 million people. Just hard to comprehend.
Yeah. I will say, even so, someone living in New York, I went to Shanghai 5, maybe 6 years ago. And there's a famous building there. I think it's called the Can Opener Building. It looks like a can opener.
Yeah. Love it. Yep.
And went up there and, you look out and I've never seen something like this, like something out of a sci-fi novel. It's just as far as the eye can see is city in all directions, 360 degrees. It's nuts. But one thing,
and that's 126 stories, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
One of the tallest buildings in the world.
But the difference in economic conditions. So despite the long term, like let's leave the long term of China out of it. Right now, they're just in a very different position than the United States and other G7 countries seem to be in. Actually, one chart that I thought was really interesting that I got to give a shout out to Urban Cowboy, Michael Cow, who was on the program this week. He had a great observation about the 2s and 10s of the US versus other countries. So take a look at this. Let's see if I can share this on my screen. But if you have to squint here, what you're looking at is this is a new feature on Koifin. You can chart the spread on the 2s and 10s between different countries. And he's got China, which is this orange line. He's got Italy, Germany, Japan, and then the United States. And you can actually see that it's a positive, so a non-inverted yield curve for Italy, Japan, China, and then down low. So we've got Germany down there with us, but the US 2s and 10s, even after this rise in long-term rates, which has uninverted a little bit, some of the yield curve still inverted. But look at the difference there in between these spreads. So you've got the US 2s and 10s spread clocking in at negative 0.74%, and Japan, Italy, China positive anywhere from 0.6 to 0.45%. Seems like that's a pretty interesting discrepancy, right? Like,
incredible, right? And because a positive spread is a positive indicator for future economic activity.
Right.
Negative spread is not. And what I think is so interesting about this US, I guess you have to call it a recovery, because I will argue that we had a recession in 22. It was just a very shallow recession, just like 2001, sub 1%, like 0.9% growth for the year, 2 negative quarters. And NBER doesn't want to call it a recession because of the employment numbers, which I think are just cooked, but fine. Yet you look at a place like China with all the negative stuff like industrial production and fixed asset investment, they continue to have this positively sloped yield curve and positive GDP growth. Their GDP growth kicking the crap out of US GDP growth. Well, why is that? Oh, they cook the books. Well, we all cook the books. But the reality is, no, it's that China is still growing. It is still positive, has positive momentum, and they have a plan, right? They are changing how they survive. Whereas, for 30 years, they were the manufacturing hub of the world, just like America was after World War I. People, again, they just don't remember this, that we became the manufacturing hub for the world. And we had these high growth cities. We had all the pollution, That even went past World War II. That went into the 60s and 70s. Look at pictures of LA, downtown LA in 1970. It was not pretty. But back in the 20s and 30s, John D. Rockefeller was tonning it. And, he was pouring bad stuff in the rivers, and people were growing these things on their neck and dying all over the place. But we didn't have Environmental Protection Agency, and we didn't have the internet. So you can see pictures of this. So China is.
Can I just interject one funny thing about John D. Rockefeller there? So John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil, richest guy in probably United States history, inflation adjusted, all this stuff. He built his empire on oil, Standard Oil, right? Most people would probably assume that was the oil to feed cars.
Correct.
But it wasn't. It was kerosene oil.
Kerosene
built the
oil.
whole thing on kerosene oil, and the crude oil that the refining process of oil, when you get the crude, dump that in the river for years. For years, he just dumped it.
That's one of my favorite stories, Michael, is he dumped the effluent, right? So he took crude, made kerosene, everything else went down the river, and the river would catch on fire. And he's like, that's interesting. How does the water catch on fire? I don't understand that. And so then Henry Ford came up with this idea to build a car, and he was going to use grain alcohol as the power for the combustion engine. And John D. Rockefeller was like, Hank, dude, I got this stuff that I'm just throwing away. It lights on fire, so we could probably use it. Well, it turns out it was called gasoline. And so that's why cars run on gasoline. And then I said, you've heard me talk about this. I love this part, which is at the time, the largest car company in America was the American Electric Vehicle Corp. Right? We had electric cars in America in 1903 to 1906. And Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller came along and said, nope, we're putting you out of business. And we're going to run on internal combustion. And any technology around electric, we're just going to buy it and shelve it. So for 100 years, literally, we could have had electric cars, but these guys were too powerful and too rich. And it was all because, the Cuyahoga River used to catch on fire.
Yeah. There's some great the William Randolph Hearst, paper magnate, actually went to my high school, William Randolph Hearst. And he discovered at one point that hemp, which is related to marijuana, was potentially going to be a competitor. And he ran these smear campaigns against it. If you remember, I don't know if this was exactly him, but the Reefer Madness skits of, which by the way, funny in retrospect, definitely, there was some straight up lying going on in there. No one smokes marijuana and then tries to kill people. I mean, that is just, come on.
No,
legitimate risks, but come on.
But look, that is, and this is a topic for another day, but that is what media has done for millennia, right? That's been the purpose of media, was to foment your view and to protect your domain, your dominion. And so why does the US put out propaganda on how bad it is in China? Because that serves our interests. Why did the Nazis put out propaganda about, the countries they were fighting against? That's what propaganda is. Reefer Madness was propaganda, right? Think about the things that used to play during the Vietnam War about Southeast Asians. They weren't exactly complimentary, shall we say.
Yeah.
You go to the movie theater and you see the little clip, or even during World War II, go all the way back. So that process is real. Well, let's take seed oils, right? Why does everybody consume so much seed oil? Because the company that makes seed oils sponsored a study when the president had a heart attack, and they wanted to show that saturated fat killed people. Okay. They did the study, this global study, and it turned out there was no correlation. between how much fat you ate and heart disease. So what did they do? They just threw out the 9 countries that were off the chart, and they drew a line and said, see, we proved it. And that study then allowed margarine to become the thing. And then seed oils are now in 92% of our food products. And people are shocked, I tell you, Michael, that obesity and other ailments, chronic ailments. Do you know P.D. Mangan, the guy on Twitter? He's a fitness guy. I love the guy. I love him because he's a couple years older than me, and he's always posting pictures of him in a tank top. You know, he's all ripped, and I just love it. But and he posted a picture yesterday that I thought was unbelievable. They did a study of insulin resistance, right? So it's basically how often does your body have to produce insulin to fight all the bad stuff, the inflammation in your body. And there are 3 groups: low, medium, and high. The low group, right, which are basically people who eat right, exercise, don't eat a lot of seed oils, etc. Zero incidence of heart disease, cancer. I mean, and this is like real data. And it's like, wait a second, that one thing, and it has to do with sugar intake and all this, but it was just wild that if you look at, you know, sugar intake and seed oil intake from the 50s to today, it's a straight up line. And if you look at diabetes and heart disease and coronary artery disease, it's an amazing thing.
We allow way too much crap in our food in the U.S. I'll agree with you there. And
well, I'll tell you, we'll leave it on this. I was at Starbucks yesterday on the way Tuesday. You know, again, PTSD for you, but you know, I had to get up early, take the Dark 30 flight, get a little caffeine. So I'm picking up my large black coffee from Starbucks, and a venti frappuccino with whipped cream and caramel drizzle. The greatest magic trick of all time is Starbucks convincing an entire generation that a 1,400 calorie milkshake is coffee.
You know what? The funny thing, though, about it's Howard Schultz is the founder. Yeah. So the inspiration was how Italian people drink coffee. I was in Paris last month for ECC. You know, you get up there, there's a million little cafes. They pour you the little espresso, Americano, whatever. You're supposed to sip it. It's much smaller. It's about a quarter of the size of the portions that you get over in the US. And that's what he wanted to bring over to the US. But you know what Americans didn't want? That. You know what they did want? Those milkshakes, Mark. This is what for better or worse, this is what, and this is also, I'll be a defender of media here because I do believe in it. But what are you supposed to do if what you got to give people what they want? Also, I mean, you're going to stand on your high horse, say people should have different tastes than they have. It's tough. It's a hard balance to strike.
Okay. That's interesting. You got to keep people. Okay, but here's the thing, and I shouldn't say this, but the woman who grabbed that 1,400 calorie milkshake weighed more than me by a meaningful amount and was not 5'6". Okay. So very obese. Okay. Grab that milkshake. And you say, we got to give people what they want. Okay. But then if that person does that to themselves because they got what they want, should they be allowed to get free medical care?
The U.S. system says yes. Kind of, right?
I understand what the system says. But that's interesting. It's an interesting question for me, right? Which is if it's kind of like spenders and savers, right?
Yeah.
In this country, we punish intelligent, prudent savers at the expense of profligate spenders.
Yeah.
Right? We bail out banks at the expense of the prudent depositors. And Ma, right, who had a fixed income for 13 years, got paid zero.
Yeah.
So that, the John D. Rockefellers of the world could buy another home on a beach and get, subsidized insurance for building in a floodplain. I don't know. I understand why it happens, because he who has the gold makes the rules, but I'm not sure it's right.
I don't know if it's right either. I will say every system has its trade-offs. You do not get the good without the bad. There are plenty of other healthcare systems, European healthcare systems, which prioritize preventative medicine. Americans don't want that. They do not like being told what to do at all.
I know.
And there are so many pros to that, right? There are so many good things that come along with that. A negative side of that is this crap. Americans being like,
here's the weird thing. If you're a bad driver, getting accidents all the time, do you pay more for your insurance?
Yeah, you do.
Turns out you do.
I know. You draw the line somewhere, right? I mean, I think you, as a smoker, really weird, right? As a smoker, you pay more for your insurance, right? I think you do.
Yeah. But it, we've decided that, it's politically incorrect, to fat shame people or whatever. And again, I'm probably going to get, barred from the channel for talking about this, but I just don't think people's decisions should be free of consequences.
I think that's a fair take. All right, Mark, we got to wrap it here. As always, best hour of my week. Missed you last week, and be back here sometime next week.
Well, this Ireland thing, it's a big draw. So
the Irish. Yeah. Well, good luck to your friends who are drinking Guinnesses tonight.
Cheers, everybody. Go Irish. Have a good one. Have a good weekend.